This is the Building a Clear Authentic Brand podcast, and I'm your host, Amy Dardis. And today I am so excited to have Chuck Mobley on the show. Chuck is the owner of Polar Bear Air Conditioning in Georgetown, Grand Cayman Islands. He grew up in a tiny town of Pine Forest, Texas, which had about 250 people. And when he was 23 years old, he moved to the Grand Cayman Islands and ended up starting his business from nothing with his wife back in 1988. And over the course of time, they have grew it into a successful business. They have almost 45 employees, and they are closing in on 4,000 five-star reviews over their divisions in their businesses. He's also the author of Leap Before You Look, But God, which just released in March of 2026. So, Chuck, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Amy, for having me. It's a pleasure.
So you are from Texas, but you ended up moving to the Grand Cayman Islands. How on earth did that happen?
By the grace of God, I can only say. I had never even heard of the Cayman Islands. And even after I got here, I couldn't pronounce it properly and couldn't spell it. But just by the grace of God, I was in air conditioning and still am. And things were really slow because we have a shoulder season in Texas where it's not warm enough for people to use their air conditioning, and it's not cold enough to use their heating. So we call that a shoulder season. So we were very low on work. And so in my spare time, I would go to a little pallet yard where they refurbished these wooden pallets that the forklifts lift up. And I met a gentleman there, and he looked a little foreign to me. I mean, this is in Southwest Texas, and he talked funny. And so I asked him, I said, "Paul, where are you from?" And he said, "I'm from the Cayman Islands." And I kind of squinted at him like I'd never heard of it. And I said, "Where is that?" And he explained to me that it was a little tiny dot in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. And he said, "Wow," he says, "you're an air conditioning technician. You could get a job easily there." And that stuck in my mind. And back in the day, we didn't have, I'm aging myself now, but we didn't have the internet. And so, but you could call the area code of any place in 555-1212, and it was like dialing 411, which a lot of your listeners probably don't know about that either. But I got the name of an air conditioning company and asked if they were looking for technicians. And he says, "Yeah." And I sent in my resume by mail, not email. And like a month later, I got an invitation to come out, and I interviewed for the job. I got the job. And in 1984, I moved to Cayman with $100 in my pocket, which is nothing here. And by the time I landed, it turned into 80 because the currency is, the Cayman dollar is actually stronger than the US dollar. So that's how I ended up. But I think really by the grace of God, I think he had it predestined and planned that I would come to the Cayman Islands, an island I had never heard of and couldn't pronounce.
So did you have a Texan accent like at some point in your life? Because you don't anymore.
No, I didn't. And I'm not sure why, but even as I moved to Texas when I was 6 and came from Los Angeles. And I recall my cousin looking at us when we first met, our Southern cousins. And he, just like I said, mimicked a little while ago, he says, "Y'all talk funny." And I thought, I'm never going to talk like even as a little kid. I think the accent now is charming. I love it. I have family visiting this week, and I notice how country they sound and how intriguing it is. So I love the accent. I just never took it upon. I mean, I made a conscious effort to have like a non-distinct, maybe a Midwestern accent. So, and I started mimicking people in Cayman because we Caymanians talk a lot different. We have our slang. It's not really a patois like the Jamaicans, but that you can. I started mimicking them, and then I started picking up in my normal conversation words that we say.
Yeah, because it grows on you over time.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you end up starting your own business then?
Oh, do you have to ask that, Amy?
I do.
You want a lie or you want the truth?
I
There,
want the truth. Just tell me
I
the
was
good
hired
stuff.
from the job that I got hired from Texas to do.
Uh-huh.
I was really coming here for 5 months in
Okay.
1984, and now it's 2026, and it'll be in another 3 weeks. It'll be 42 years that I've been here. But
Wow.
the original company I signed on with to come to work in Cayman, I got fired from that job. And what happened was they had promised me a company vehicle when I came, and of course, in air conditioning company, you need a service vehicle, right?
Mhm.
And when I didn't have a vehicle, I needed transportation just to get to work. And so I bought a little used junky car, the cheapest thing I could find. And so when they saw I had a car, they just started asking me to use that to run service calls. And I thought it was temporary. And they would give me, I think it was $25 a week to put gas in the car, which wasn't even covering my gas. And so
Mhm.
after a couple of years, they started getting all the technicians to use their cars. So we formed a little group, and we asked the gentleman that owned the company if he would increase our allowance, or better yet, just buy some vehicles. I mean, you have a service company, so you need service vans or trucks. I had a little old broken down sports car, and we gave him 7 or 8 months to get the vehicles. And I remember it was New Year's, the week after New Year's in 1988. And we went into him and said, well, what did you decide? This is like 8 months. And he said, well, I decided just to leave things like they are. You guys will keep driving your cars. We'll give you your gas allowance. And I just spoke up and I said, well, I can't speak for the rest of them. I said, but my car is going to stay in the parking lot. I said, I can't afford, to subsidize your company. And the others agreed. There were four others. And he says, well, I guess I don't have any technicians. You're all fired.
Oh.
And so it was the first time I had just gotten married 6, 7 months earlier. And I'm thinking how, I stood in front of 400 people and promised to protect you and provide for you. And all my wedding vows came crashing into my head. And now I don't even have a job. So we went to our little small apartment. We started, discussing what are we going to do? Because Amy, I never had any inclination to have my own business. I would love to say that,
Mhm.
from a young kid, I wanted to be this business person. I had this dream, but I really didn't. And so about 20 minutes, we're sitting there drinking coffee. We weren't enjoying. The phone rang, and it was a condominium complex. And they said, Chuck, what's going on? This is my home phone. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, we called the company and they said they don't have any technicians. And I said, well, what's the problem? And she says, well, we have two air conditioners that are out. And I looked across from me and there's four Caymanians sitting there unemployed. Uh, I said, oh, well, I could take care of that. And I said, give me about 20 minutes. I couldn't work because I was on his work permit. I was still an expat and I needed a
Mhm.
permit. So I sent two of the guys out. They fixed it. And then, a couple hours later, somebody else called, and that's how our business started.
Oh my gosh.
I ended up buying out the partners because we were only making, I mean, we were making very little in the beginning, like $50 a week that we could pay ourselves. And because my wife was working, I could afford it. The rest of the
Mhm.
guys couldn't afford it. So within a year, they had all backed out, and we had bought out their shares. And then like a year later, I found I'm sitting there. I'm the secretary, I'm the technician, I'm the designer, I'm the parts order, I'm payroll, I'm HR. So, and then from then, the company just started to grow by leaps and bounds. I think by year 10, we probably had 20 employees, and now
Wow.
we have 45, and our employees come from all over the world. We have like 14 different nationalities represented, so it's very fun. It's a great atmosphere to work in. But and that again, I didn't know the difference between, a fitted sheet and a spreadsheet. I knew nothing about business, but I did know how to give really good service, and it paid off, you know. And so, but I think it was a forgiving economy, and I think there again, God had a plan where His vision for me was greater than anything that I could have ever could have ever envisioned for myself. I never imagined myself on a tropical island or owning my own business or with, a beautiful island queen for a wife. It's just by the grace of God. God has been so good to me, you know?
When you were growing up, were you one of those people who had a vision, or did you have just no vision? You were just like, I have no idea what's going to happen with my life.
No, I was a kid that my life was just having fun. And if it was at somebody else's expense, that made it even funner. So I was the kid that was the no account. I was called no account by countless people, which just means is a Southern way of saying that boy ain't gonna amount to nothing. And my only dream was to play Major League Baseball. And
Okay.
when my dreams and the Major League teams, dreams didn't align, then it was strike three, you're out. So that was a pretty big blow to me because I got to a certain level and I felt like I could make it, and I was crushed when reality finally struck me that, you're competing against guys that you might be better than them now, but they have a lot more raw potential.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so no, I didn't have, my only dream was to become a Major League Baseball player. I had no plan B whatsoever.
None. So growing up, were you a Christian?
I was.
Okay.
I gave my life to Jesus at 7 years old, right after I burnt the entire forest down. So when we moved to Pine Forest, I was just turning, I think 3 days after I turned 7. It was in July of probably 1968, and I was back in the back of our house playing Forest Ranger or something, and I ended up burning the entire acres and acres and acres of forest down. And I went and hid under my aunt's porch, who we were staying with, and they knew automatically because I had a reputation, even by 7 years old, that it was me, and I got the beating of my life. So, what was the original question? How did I get into that?
Was you? I had said, were you a Christian? And you said you gave your life, your life to Christ.
We went to an Assembly of God church, and this is after I burned the forest down, and I was constantly in trouble. And the minister gave us a Sunday night. I was 7 years old, and he gave this impassioned, fiery sermon about that we need Jesus. So I went up to the front, and I stood at the front, and then I had to go to the bathroom. I had to pee so bad. And I'm there squirming and trying to hold it. I didn't know. I mean, this is the honesty of a kid. I didn't know if I left to go to the bathroom, if I would miss having Jesus in my heart. So I stayed, and I peed my pants. I had pee in my pants and Jesus in my heart. And that was the first time that I had gone up front. And then I got baptized later. Besides the pee baptism, I got baptized, a real baptism. But I took the scenic route. I was very close to the Lord, but then I would get very far away. I would drift. And my teen years, it was really different in my case because I was a Christian, but I was very mischievous. I would get into just pranks and practical jokes and like taking the tires off the teacher's car or something and hiding them and just always doing pranks. When my sister got baptized, she was kind of heavy, and from the back of the church, I yelled, "Tidal wave!" And so things like that. And when I went to the Cayman Islands, Amy, I thought, okay, that reputation, nobody knows me in Cayman. I did not know one soul. And I'm going to sow my wild oats. And I ended up homeless because I ran $100 doesn't go very far, especially when it turns to 80. For the first week, I slept on the beach. And then like 6 weeks later, I met the most beautiful woman in the world. And I met her. You want to hear this story?
Yes. Tell me how you met her.
So we have a festival in Cayman called Pirates Week. And because apparently we had a lot of pirate activity back in the 1800s. And so they have this parade, and it's called the Pirates Week Parade. And in this parade, they have these big elaborate floats and steel panned drums and bands and all kind of things. And they had a Miss Hawaiian Tropic float, the suntan lotion. So here's this float full of Hawaiian Tropic girls in bikinis that are all part of the contest. And I see this girl kind of in the middle. She's not wearing a bathing suit. She has shorts and a blouse on, a puffy pink blouse. And I looked up and this float is going across. And I thought, that is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. And I thought, Chuck, you need to meet her. And I don't know if you've ever argued with yourself, but then this other voice says, you? She's way too good for you. And I'm thinking, yeah, but she doesn't know that. And then you're going to make a fool out of yourself in front of everybody. And well, what do you have to lose? Well, you might get thrown in jail. Who knows? And I just said, you know what? I'm going to go meet her. I ran behind the float. I jumped on it. I introduced myself. And 2.5 years later, we were married.
So you just jumped on the float. Clearly, there's a little bit of an argument there, but still,
Right.
I mean, that's a bold move.
It was, especially with somebody that probably should have just slapped me and says, get out of here, or I could have gotten arrested, but it worked out. And that's been the story of my life. I leap before I look, and I worry about the landing later on. And for most of my life, it's worked out really well. None better than that leap.
Right.
But it wasn't easy.
That's the title of the book, Leap Before You Look, but then you add but God. So and
that means that God intervened, God showed up, God changed the circumstances or something like that. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. So when you go to leap, right? When you go to jump into something, whether it's meeting a woman or moving to the Grand Cayman or starting a business, there's not a lot of pre-analytical behavior going on. I mean, is there even a part of you that's afraid or oh, maybe I shouldn't do this? Or does that cross your mind?
I think there's a benefit in being young and stupid because you don't know that there's consequences. You don't know that you shouldn't do certain things. And so I was just young and stupid and naive, and I just did things, and they tended to work out more often than not. I mean, the first time I went to Europe, I went with a Euro pass, a little bit of money in my pocket. I flew to Frankfurt, Germany with a train pass for 2 weeks. And I just walked across. I got my luggage. I walked out of the airport, walked across to the train station, and I just got on the first train I saw. I had no idea where it was going. I just said, wherever it's going, I've never been there. I couldn't decide where I wanted to go. So I ended up in Basel, Switzerland. And then I spent all my money outside of Basel skiing. And so I was on my own for a week with no money again in Europe. So,
I mean,
yeah, so to answer your question, even now, if I decide to do something, if I think of something and I say, oh, we should do that one day. And then I think, why one day? Let's do it now. And then I'll go book it before I change my mind. So we're very, and my wife has caught on to this, and we're very spontaneous. I mean, we've taken trips just on a couple of hours notice.
Yeah.
I mean,
just
talking big trips. I go to Mongolia, say, hey, let's, and we go there and then we figure it out on the way. Or sometimes we never figure it out.
Have you ever found yourself in a season or in an experience where you were just I honestly don't know, oops, what did I do? Now, rock in a hard place. Yeah. How is this going to work out?
Yeah, that's happened a few times. I'm also a natural show off. So I'm the I crave attention. I people crave salt. You could never get enough. But I was the 8th of 7 children. So, and my dad was a truck driver. So my dad was gone a lot. So my mom was home. There's one lap and there's 8 children. So, you don't have to be a genius to figure out how that division works. And my oldest brother is a literal rocket scientist. He builds things that launch into space. My second brother, the second oldest brother, he was a Disney actor. He starred in over 250 different movies and TV shows growing up. And then he was a Green Beret, a real live Green. Some actors pretend to be soldiers. My brother became one. And then I made the joke, and then there was me, So I had really nothing to offer the world. So I thought creativity and just getting attention. So one of the times I jumped into a river in the Dominican Republic, not knowing it's actually an aqueduct. So this is a thing that shoots water into an irrigation canal, which actually is a river, and it's very, very high speed. It's almost like a water park ride, but it's supposed to feed crops. This one had diverted and it went into a river. And so I decided it would be fun to slide down this thing because the water carries you. And then when you get to the end, I knew there was a whirlpool because it goes down about 15 feet. And when the water hits, it forms this big eddy or whirlpool. And my thought was, when I get to the end, I just jump out, jump over the whirlpool, and I swim to the shore. Well, I jumped right into the middle of the whirlpool. And so that was maybe the closest time that I came to dying. I just couldn't get out. And I'm a good swimmer. And I'm just swimming as hard as I can. I'm not going anywhere. And then it would suck me under. And that lasted, I'm gonna say, time probably went a lot slower than it was, but it's probably 5, 6, 7 minutes that I was in there not able to move out of this eddy. I look up at some point and people are just standing on the bank. My wife, I'm looking for somebody to hold a stick out or throw a life preserver. She's there with a camera. She's taking my picture. And the picture's in the book. I have proof of it in the book. Somehow the current changed and I was almost spat out, and I swam to shore and I just lay there heaving, thanking God. But that was one thing where I thought, wow, Chuck, is attention really this important that you're willing to die for it? I've done a static line skydive where the parachute didn't open all the way. It only opened up about halfway. So I'm looking up and it's like a broken umbrella, in a windstorm. And I was able to twist my legs, and the guy was hollering at me in a radio set, twist your legs, twist your legs. And so I did, and then it opened and everything ended up fine. But there's probably about 10 different circumstances similar to that. Some of I have no doubt that God's grace helped me to survive those. There's one really recently that I really don't want to go into because the person that is involved didn't survive it. So maybe I didn't even feel comfortable putting it in my book because it was a plane crash that I wasn't on the plane, but by all intents and purposes, I was on the first leg, but I can't even say it's by divine intervention. Because the guy who was killed in the crash, he was a Christian missionary taking relief supplies to Jamaica. And so it's just, it's something that I can't understand. Why I don't understand how God works, but I have learned not to question him either. His ways are much higher than, than the way that I can think.
Do you feel like in those situations where you feel like, for all intents and purpose, it easily could have gone another way, that is God's grace and provision and protection over your life, in the sense that he's like, Chuck, your life belongs to me. So I need you to be willing to do whatever I ask of you.
Right. It's almost like, this is not the last chapter. I'm still writing your story, Chuck. So don't try to kill yourself. I haven't finished with your story. I have work for you to do. And I think each of us, Amy, we have a purpose that God has us here for.
Yeah.
And I've never been able to understand that God can use my personality, my pranks, my trying to be funny, my adventurousness, my sense of adventure for his glory. But the book itself, I've had a lot of people write in and say, wow, your book touched me. I was crying one page and the next page I'm crying laughing. I decided to make up with my sister because I read your chapter about your siblings. And so, yeah, he's not finished writing my story yet, which is why I'm still here.
What do you feel like is maybe one of the bigger lessons or something that kind of God has taught you over the years?
Not take myself so seriously. One thing that he has to remind me of is, as a human, and I'm sure that all of your listeners will relate to this, is as important as I think I am to this world, everybody on earth feels the same exact way. And so my needs are no more important than this person walking down the street that I see later on. No matter the accolades or however many books we write or what title we have, the most important person in everybody's life is themselves. And I've made the mistake of going around thinking that, I'm the most important person. When, to me, maybe to even in our families, we're the most important people. And God has to constantly remind me of that, is that I don't love you any more than I love these people. And
Yeah.
these are my children too. So treat them, you know, treat them well.
Yeah. You have a bold, fearless, like, mischievous personality. Like, how did that play into how you ran your business?
It, I think it actually helped because I
Yeah.
didn't take things so serious. You have a big loss a month where you lose. Okay, well,
Mhm.
it's an opportunity that we can, it's going to be easier to ramp back up then to get sales back up. When I would handle, sometimes kids that are creative and get in trouble. I say creative, but they can get in trouble in creative ways. And so I was able to use that creativity in my business. So we had a couple of guys that would come in late all the time. And you could
Mhm.
tell it's not fair to everyone else. You come in when you want, you could fire them, which doesn't do us any good or it doesn't do them any good. So
Mhm.
I just bought a toilet. I put it in front of, we have a meeting every morning. So I had this toilet sitting there. And anybody that came in late, they had to sit on the toilet in front of everyone. And then I also had a hula hoop, and they would have to hula hoop in front of everybody if they came in late. And it actually worked. They stopped after sitting on the toilet a couple of times. They got tired of it and they started coming in on time. So we
That's
can use our mischievousness to our advantage. It's helped in marketing and doing things that people say, "Oh, you shouldn't do that," and we do it, and it works out somehow.
yeah. I think at people's core, we all crave authenticity and connection. I mean, and in business, we almost kind of trick ourselves into being like, oh, well, there's a right way to do it, And then it's like we lose sight of like that very human thing that is why people are like, yeah, I want to hire this plumbing or this air conditioning outfit because they're creative and fun and they have a personality.
Or if they make a mistake, they're not so above that. We admit when we make mistakes. I mean, we're not, every service call doesn't go right. And
Mhm.
so there's one thing that happened. It could have been one of the worst things to happen. But one day we got a call. I mean, we're all about customer service. You treat the customer. We want the public to respect us. I don't want to see our car outside of our business vehicle, outside of a bar, even if you're off hours. If you're in our uniform, I want you to behave, be a gentleman, be a lady, because you're representing our company. So
Mhm.
one day we got a call about 8 o'clock one morning, and the customer said, or somebody from the public, they said, I found a polar ladder in the middle of the street on Beach Bay Road, which tells me that somebody was going really fast and the ladder flipped out and they didn't even bother to, they didn't notice, and it just looked bad. And
Mhm.
so I got we hadn't had our meeting yet. So I huddled everybody up and I said, look, this is what happened. Who lost their ladder? Nobody said anything. I said, guys, I said, we're not going anywhere until I find out who lost their ladder on Beach Bay Road. Nobody said anything. They all went. I said, go check your trucks. Everybody came back. I have my ladder. I have my ladder. We checked the computer to see who was working on Beach Bay Road. Nobody. And I went to get a cup of coffee, and as I was pouring my coffee, I thought, goodness, I have borrowed a company truck with a ladder in the back. I was on Beach Bay Road, and I remember going fast, and it's a little light ladder. So it was me. So then I
Okay.
had to think, oh goodness, do I just say, okay, I'm going to find out later and not admit it? So I had, as much as I preached to the guys about being honest and having integrity and all, I had to sit them down. I said, guys, I hate to admit this. I said, but that was me. And I said, I'm sorry for accusing you. And I'm sure some of them, snickered to themselves and laughed at me later on. But it was a moment where I think our employees thought, he's willing to fess up. He could
Yeah.
have hidden it. And I think that's when I gained a lot more respect from my employees than
Mhm.
had I covered it up and thought, oh, Mr. Perfect, that would never happen to me. So I learned a lot from that lesson. And first of all, not to really accuse people unless you really know what's going on. But it was me.
Was that something where you wrestled with that a little bit? Or was it like, no, I need to fess up because I'm never going to be able to have peace if I don't?
Shamelessly, I did wrestle with it. I mean, it was a couple of minutes of thinking, well, nobody has to know it was you. And then it just didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And I could have gotten away with it. And I mean, there's probably been other times where I've lied my way out of it. I'm not going to try to, you'll never find a halo over my head. But that particular time, and I've tried since then. We have a core value in our company that's called integrity and all, and we believe in that, and we abide by that.
How did you come up with your core values? Or at what point did you decide that you needed to define them and write them out?
The first one was give a great service, and I didn't really know they were core values, Amy.
Okay.
I didn't know what a core value was. Like I said, I didn't know what a spreadsheet was. I didn't know what a profit and loss or a balance sheet was. I had no idea what any of this stuff was until I'd been in business a few years. But I did know that we needed to give great service and go. And when I talk about great service, I mean, we had a lady that was, her attic access was in her bathroom, and she was moving her things off the counter, and she dropped her perfume and it broke all over the floor. She dropped it, but she was doing it to accommodate us so we could get in. So I made a note of what kind of perfume it was, and when we took a break, I bought her that perfume and brought it and gave it to her. And so just little touches like that have what made our company popular, and that some people would never ever think about using anybody else.
Yeah,
so even impeccable service was the first core value, and another one was when we tried to cheat on immigration. You have to have a work permit in order to work in the Cayman Islands. And we had another company where there was an American guy that was at another company that didn't have much work. And they asked us if we wanted to borrow him for a couple of weeks. And without thinking, knowing it was wrong, I said, sure, we'll try him out. Because we were going to try him out and then maybe hire him because we needed somebody. So they had no work. We had plenty of work. And after about 2 weeks, I thought, yeah, this guy's good. Let's hire him. So we're going to take out a permit for him. So the guy went and got his permit pictures. You have to get like passport pictures. He got his pictures. He filled out his thing. He brought them to me. Now he's working with us illegally. He's not supposed to be. He has a permit, but it's with a different company.
Okay.
He brings in his paperwork with his picture to ask for permission from the government if he can work with polar bear. And his picture is in a polar bear uniform. And so we're basically telling on ourselves. So I said, Joe, please, that's when it hit me that you're doing this all wrong. This is not how you run a business. I said, go back to your company as soon as we'll go take different pictures out of our uniform, and we'll get a permit the legal way. And then that became our second core value, integrity and all. And so it's easy though to kind of justify. And because of my justification, well, he has a permit. It's just not with us, and he doesn't have any work there. And we're helping them, we're helping him, we're helping ourselves. Nobody loses. But I've learned that if you stick to integrity and all, you don't have to cover yourself. You don't have to hide things. You don't have to remember lies. You don't have to, So that was our second core value. But we actually just came up with core values probably 15 years ago, where we actually called them core values. And I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just things that are stuck on the wall, that they're things that we live out. And so we hire people based on our core values. One of them is we're family oriented. And if we don't think somebody fits in with the family, then we don't hire them.
How do you check for that, or how do you see if they're family oriented?
Personally, what I like to do, now I'm out of the company now for a few months. What I would do, almost everyone that applied, because our interview process is somebody flying overseas to come and spend a few days with us. So I would do a couple of things. I would have an event where a lot of the people in the company were involved, maybe a picnic, maybe a softball or volleyball game, and see how they conduct themselves. And then take them to restaurants and see how they treat the wait staff.
Okay.
So that's been a secret of mine, that I would just watch people and how they interact with the wait staff. If they're very demanding, and then that's not somebody that would fit in in our atmosphere in our company. But if they're very kind and, and they're laughing and joking, then that's somebody that fits in well.
Did you ever have somebody that you came over and you were just like appalled at how they acted in a restaurant?
Yeah, so some guys, didn't show up. We would fly them out. Well, I was smart about that. We would give them half of their money after they bought their ticket and came out. But we had a couple of guys over the years that, their first night out, they got just completely rat-faced. They would go out to a bar and they couldn't even come in for the interview. So they basically fired themselves before they got the job.
Mm-hmm. So
Mhm.
you were able to see like them in real life in specific situations instead of just
Exactly.
asking them, how do you
Right. Do you
handle
drink?
this?
No, I never drink.
Do you have like when would you do a lot of the interviews when you
I
were
would do almost
hiring?
all of the interviews. I have a little bit of intuition after all the years of
Okay.
of doing things, and like you're letting me do a lot of the talking, I would
Uh-huh.
normally let the applicant do a lot of the talking. So
Mhm.
and the more people talk, the more they give up of themselves, the more vulnerable they become. And I
Mhm.
always like to have one of our female staff members, because you all have a lot better intuition than we do. Somebody can tell me this, this, and this, and I'll believe them,
Mhm.
because I would tend to sell myself short and want to pleasantly surprise somebody. So
Mhm.
I'm really good at something, and if somebody asks me, I'll say, I'm all right at it. And then I want to surprise them later and let them see, wow, this guy is good. And so I think everybody's like that, but not all people. So I sell myself short, so I don't trust my instinct sometimes when somebody tells me something. So I'll get one of the ladies, one of our lady managers, as part of the interview process, and I find that you all have that sixth sense that
Mhm.
knows certain things.
Mhm.
And I think there's been a couple of ladies in the office that saved us, a lot of heartache by saying, I don't have a good feeling about this guy. And then we
Yeah.
did, and then we find out something later.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah,
use kind
having
of a
that.
team approach to hire people, and there's always a lady involved in the decision-making process.
Mhm. What are some other kind of intuitions or things that you've just picked up on over the years when you're interviewing? Like things you look for, questions you ask?
One of the things is like with a resume, when I mean, this is obvious, when you see holes in somebody's resume, or when you see 4 jobs over 20 years and they don't list any of those people as references. So I always check
Mm.
those references. They'll have references, but it'll be, it could be their uncle for all I know. Or their best friend. I don't know. So I make it a point to go the extra mile, and I find these companies and I call them up. And that's one thing that I found is very helpful, because people don't put you as a reference for a reason.
Yes, it's true.
Mhm.
Yeah. What are you said you're really big on making sure that your core values aren't just something that are on a wall. How how have you ingrained your core values into your
We have what's called Core Wednesday, which the first Wednesday of every month, we focus on a core value. So, and one, like, why? Well, it'll be something different. It'll usually be some kind of team building thing. So we'll do provide a great service and
Mhm.
100% satisfaction is one of our core values.
Okay.
One day we split the teams up into like 5 groups, and we gave them 15 minutes to come up with a mime or a skit without words. And so it's amazing how creative people can be. We had people sitting the customer down, polishing their shoes, shining their head, and doing their nails while one of them's changing his filter. And it's hilarious. But we do skits like that. We do all kind of team building things where we just focus on
Mhm.
that value. We've taken them to a restaurant where we knew the service was suspect, or that they could improve the service.
Okay.
And one of the things, our prices, I mean, we hire the best people we can find, and our prices reflect that.
Mhm.
And so we're one of the more higher price companies in Cayman. And to justify that, we've taken them to like a normal restaurant, our technicians will sit down, we'll have a meal and have them observe the service. And then we'll take them like to the Ritz-Carlton, where by the end of the night, the waiter knows each of their first name, knows their kids and things like that. And then we'll do a little study on it and say, what was the difference? How did this make you feel? How did, it's backfired on us a couple of times because the cheaper restaurant that we took them to actually provided better service. But they noticed the
But they
little,
noticed.
yeah, they noticed the
Yeah.
little things that the waiters did and didn't do. And
Mm-hmm.
so we'll do outings like that for training and just to show them what our core values look like in action.
Those are really great ideas. I mean, how did you, like, these are all just like off the cuff ideas, like not your standard, boardroom type of training. How did you come up with stuff like this?
I have no idea. The same way I've figured out how to steal the organist's shoe at church. The organist every Sunday takes her shoes off to play the organ, and for years and years I would take her shoe, one shoe, and then we'd pass it around the church. And so just odd things pop into my mind. Some of them are bizarre and some of them work out. They don't always work out, but just that God blessed me with a creative mind, and I use it to for the good, and I use it for mischief. So
You said that you've done some creative stuff with your marketing as well. What do you mean by that?
we have a bear that we bought from a museum, and a polar bear that we bought from a museum in Montreal.
Okay.
And we brought him on the island, and we put him. I had surgery on my shoulder a few years back, and I put him in front of my house. I had a sling, and the bear had a sling on him. He's sitting outside of my house, and it says, get well, Chuck. We had a customer who was a judge that was retiring, and we took the bear, and we got, those English wigs that the judges wear? We put that on him and put a little robe thing on him, and we put him out at the courthouse. They weren't happy about that. It was kind of rogue guerrilla marketing. And we put a sign, congratulations, Judge so-and-so, Judge Smelly. And it made the newspaper, actually, but the clerk of the court called us. Who gave you permission to do this? And I'm not really sure. Let me check with my marketing department and then see. And then by the time, we were going to get in trouble, I had the guys go grab him. And so we took him to the airport after COVID because our island shut down completely. And we had him in like one of these touristy shirts with a camera around in this straw hat. It says, welcome back to the Cayman Islands. But that's some of the fun things that we've been able to do. One Yellow Page ad, which everybody told me not to do. I put all the guys in with bags over their heads and little eye holes. And the caption was, we may be ugly, but we're good. And I've broken the rules on almost every marketing thing. My daughter's doing marketing now. She's a little more tame than I am.
But you probably got so much feedback from your customers on like, oh my gosh, I saw your ad or I saw your polar bear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kids, we had one customer that told me, our kid, because we weren't real heavy on it at one time. In fact, we ruined him because he's out in the rain and the elements. But we had one customer that said, where's the polar bear this weekend? My kids are asking about him. They're driving around trying to find him.
That's
it's a cool name that we can do a lot with. We've been able to do a lot with the polar bear in the Cayman Islands.
Yeah, which is also just kind of a little bit of a contradiction too.
Yeah.
You don't have many polar bears in the...
Yeah, iguana hair didn't have the same ring to it as polar bear hair.
Are these, like, you have this creative spirit. Is it something that you've also been able to kind of, do you feel like you attract employees who also kind of bring a creative energy, or you kind of instill that into the environment there?
I think to an extent you can instill it. So my guys they'll hear that a customer's sick and they'll stop by the grocery store and buy a bouquet of flowers, or stop by a florist and they'll buy some flowers and take to their... Because I had one guy that he was at this lady's house and her grass was like up to his knees, and he went around, he couldn't even find the air conditioning unit, and on his lunch break he went and he rented a mower and he mowed the lady's grass for free.
And
So
he's
that
yeah,
came natural to him, but he
he just
felt the
knew.
freedom to be able to do it because he
Yeah.
worked. I mean, we've had longtime customers. We had one lady I recall that had cancer, and she lived alone. And
Mhm.
a couple of our technicians on the weekend would go by and sit with her, and then, she didn't have any family. They would just sit with her. I didn't even know about this until later on. So we try to hire that type of people, but as far as you can instill a certain amount, I mean, we've had contests where who can do the most outlandish thing for a customer. And it doesn't reach my level of outlandishness, but they're constantly reminded that we're not in the air conditioning business. We're in the people business,
Mhm.
and yeah, we want to keep them cool, but it's because they're people and they deserve to have a comfortable environment to live in. But that's one of the hardest things to remember is that we're in the people business. We're not, and that goes for any industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you pump gas I guess they don't do that in the US anymore, but if you work at a gas station, if you weren't there, people couldn't put gasoline in their car, and they couldn't get to where they need to get. And so we're in the people business. And
Mhm.
then nowadays, Amy, we're not competing against, people in Mayberry. Or are you in Palmer? Where in
Yeah,
Alaska?
yeah.
Palmer.
Palmer,
You
Alaska.
you know, you're not competing with people in Palmer, Alaska anymore because people have interactions with people globally. So we're in
Mhm.
competition with Disney World, or we're in competition with Universal, with Dunkin' Donuts, and it's no more just this local yokel thing where we just have to be the best game in town. We're competing against some big
Yeah,
players.
for time and attention, always,
Mhm.
always.
Yeah.
But you have made an intentional focus to keep it just human first and foremost, like just people, people, people.
And fun, and it's been fun. One of the things that I had forgotten about, one of the a lot of our guys we'll have a meeting in the morning, and then we have a lot of camaraderie. I mean, these guys have come from 14 different countries, and they're like best friends, and it's really hard to get them out to get 'em. So I've had to take a big black cat thing of firecrackers and actually throw it into the meeting room, and that's when they scatter. So that's one of the creative ways that we've used to get them out without lecturing them, and that hurts, had that popping in your ear. But one thing that I want to just say
Yeah.
is that I don't have a business degree.
Mhm.
I don't have any degree. And in fact, I have no degree. I never went to college. I went to trade school to learn air conditioning. And I know a lot of people say this, well, if I can do it, anybody can. But I truly mean that. I was the least likely person to get into some mechanical field. I did nothing. I mean, a lot of boys take things apart and put them back together. I just took them apart. I didn't.
And blew
So
them up
I
or
want to
set them on
encourage
fire.
people not to limit your field, because I never imagined I would be a businessman. I knew nothing about business. I didn't have that drive, and I had no mechanical skills. So it's almost God's humor, that sense of humor, that got me into a field that I would never imagine myself in. And I just
Mhm.
ended up in air conditioning by accident. Even today, I still, if a grandkids thing we need a dollhouse put together something, I have to bring my wife in. I said, "Kid, where does this go?" And so I want to encourage people. You're not just, when you're dealt with talents and skills, you're not limited to those. God has been able to use my creativity and my sense of humor in a serious field, like a technical field, when
Yeah.
I never imagined that would happen. I thought you had to
I
be like a stand-up comic to be funny, but
I do love that you said that God uses whatever we have, and oftentimes it's things that, one, we probably don't even see that we have it or value it the way that God does and that other people do, but that what he can do with it when we're willing to give it to him first is a multiplication. Yeah. So, at what point along this journey did you decide that you wanted to write this book?
I think that probably from early in my life, when all these things, I think I always knew I was going to write a book. I didn't know
Mhm.
what I was going to write it about, but I thought my life is going to be in just being mischievous in school. I had my 6th grade teacher told me I was the worst student she had ever had, and she had been teaching for like 20 something years. So I thought, well, at least I'm the best at being the worst. And then my mother had a really interesting story. She had, I mean, it's way more interesting than my story. And she started writing a book, but she passed away before she finished it. So I thought, I'm going to write a book in honor of my mom. And then I started writing my stories down, and I thought, wow, you have a lot of stories. And then I started writing my book and putting my mom in it. And then about 3/4 of the way through, I got a little tap on my shoulder, and it was like it was the Holy Spirit saying, really? You're leaving me out of this? I mean, there were some scriptures and things in the book, and it wasn't, obviously, I mean, there wasn't anything bad in it, but I wasn't focusing on that. I was telling stories so people would look and say, wow, look at all the fun, crazy stuff this guy did. And that's when I got reminded none of this would have been possible without God.
Mhm.
And so it started with wanting to write a tribute for my mom, and then my stories came in, and then it became a faith book. But it's not a typical faith book. I mean, it's not, you're like, you can turn one page and you'll be laughing, and the next page you might be crying, and the next page you might learn a life lesson. It might cause you to go pick up the phone and say, hey, I guess we don't do that anymore. Send a text, I'm sorry, and say, hey, sis, sorry about last weekend, or sorry about last year. So I'm hoping that there'll be there's a lot of life lessons, and I hope to be able to impart, a little bit of
Yeah.
wisdom in there.
How did that change in focus of it becoming a faith book? How did that change the way that you wrote the book or the way that you presented the lessons?
I think at the end of each story, I had to look at it and say, okay, Chuck, what's your point here? Are you trying to glorify yourself? Are you trying to glorify your mother, or does this give God the glory? And
Mhm.
so in the ending part of the book, I started praying before I wrote, and to make sure that what I was writing was, was coming from the Spirit. And yeah, so it was a slow process, and I had to write a lot of chapters over. But at the end of each chapter, I wanted to make sure that there was something there that focused on the Holy Spirit, God, or that His mark on my life. And
Mhm.
then it wasn't just, oh wow, this guy is crazy, you know.
Yeah. And so what would you say is the overall, like, kind of themes or lessons behind the book itself with all the
Well, there's
stories woven
a
in?
bunch of different things. One, one of the main things is you don't necessarily have to prepare for everything. And if you
Mhm.
wait until you're ready, you're gonna be waiting a long time. Yeah, because sometimes we're never ready for most things. This podcast, I could still be trying to figure out what I'm gonna say, and writing it down, but just jump on and do it. You wanna go, your dream has always been to go to Italy. Book your ticket now, and force yourself, get a non-refundable ticket, buy it now, and
Mhm.
then you have to go, you know? So I really don't, I mean, I think you should prepare, but I think being ready is way, way overrated. We're not ready for 99% of the things that we think we need to be ready for. You don't get ready to get fit, you just get fit. You don't get
Mhm.
ready to become a Christian. It's, I often compare it to people don't become a Christian because, oh, I'm too dirty. But you don't take a shower in order to get in the bathtub. You get in the bathtub, you take a shower in the bathtub to get clean. And people, we
Yeah.
treat Christ like that. Oh, once I get my life together, then I'm going to become a Christian. It doesn't work that way. I mean, it's like saying I'm going to clean up, then I'll take a bath. So I want people to be willing to leap before you look. Sometimes, it's worked out for me. Maybe not for everything. I mean, not to the extent that I do it, but you will, if you wait until you're ready, you'll never be ready. Another
Mhm.
thing is to look and say, wow, this guy's done a lot of adventurous things. He's had an adventurous, fun-filled, Christ-filled life. I didn't know Christianity could be this much fun. Uh, I thought you had to be, and I struggled with that because I was a mischievous kid, and I would prank the Pope if I got the chance. And I struggled with that, thinking this is a little Christian boy, wears glasses, he reads his Bible every day, he has knee socks on, and he makes straight A's, and he always says yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. And I've realized that God can use my adventurous spirit and my untamed part of me for his glory.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's things in the book where it will challenge you to go make amends. Life's too short. Don't let this little spat, interrupt a great relationship with your brothers or your sisters or your mothers or your best friend that you guys. And the other thing is, a lot of my greatest successes, what I would call successes, came from misfortune. Um,
Mm.
being homeless on the beach, getting fired from a job. These things have led to something. So sometimes a misfortune, that breakup that everybody but you wanted to happen, might be for the better. Losing that job that, you were crushed, it might be the best thing that ever happened to you. Even a diagnosis, a health diagnosis, it doesn't, that might be the start of something big that God is going to do in our lives. And so I've learned that misfortune doesn't always, lead to something bad. Sometimes something very good.
Yeah. Yeah. I know for me, some of the biggest breakthroughs I've ever had have come through a really, really tough season,
Mm,
and not to see that as a failure, but just to see that as that's part of the journey.
yeah.
Yeah. I do like what you said about how God can use it, but it's like, but he created you that way. He designed you that way. I mean,
Mm,
he already had that purpose in you to know that he would use your creativity and your mischievousness. And I love that your life is an example of how he used it in business, how he used it in your relationships, how you've then, rippled that effect, and he's been able to work in and through you into your employees and your customers, because you've been willing to just give them what you have.
yeah. And then especially my kids, my kids have lived through all of these things. And there's been some crazy things happen to my kids on our trips because we always do something. Always go over the limit, and something always happens. But my children today, they're all adults now. And I must say they're caring, loving, I'll give the shirt off their back type of people that bend over backwards for people. They're just good human beings. And although they weren't taught to wear their seatbelt all their lives, they all put their seatbelt on. My philosophy was safety is for sissies. And if I call all four of them up right now and I said safety is for, they'll say sissies. But they're very safety conscious, unlike me. So yeah, so it's had a
How
ripple effect in everything that we touch. And sometimes, Amy, to be honest with you, I think that one day somebody's gonna come knock on my door and they're gonna say, Chuck, there's been a mistake. This life wasn't meant for you. There's a
Mhm.
mistake, and come with me. And then somebody else is gonna step through the door and live the life that God has been so good to me. I mean, these guys getting like chill bumps saying that. But I just feel like the goodness of God is something that I will never stop, shouting that's my favorite song.
Oh,
I will
uh,
sing of the goodness of God. I love that song.
me
Yeah.
too. And you have a beautiful voice, by the way, too.
Oh, nobody's accused me of that. Thank you, though. Maybe I'll do an album next instead of a book.
I love your boldness and your willingness to jump in, because have always been on the opposite of that, where I feel like I have let fear rule me in so many different ways. And so then I'm encouraged when I talk to people like you and hear your
Mm,
stories, where I'm like, okay, and I'm actively in a season of just really trying to be like, okay, what am I afraid of? And then do it, because
mhm.
I don't want to be afraid anymore.
Yeah.
So,
But just so your move to Alaska was, if I understand right, it was like spur of the moment and you just went. Not
oh, yep,
everybody does that,
just
Amy. So
went.
don't sell yourself short. That's a big move, especially, I mean, it's not like moving to Delaware or to New Jersey. You're going to Alaska, you
Yeah.
know? So
Yes,
don't
and
say
it's
yourself
been an
short.
adventure, but again, one of those things where I look back and just only God, right? I mean, just God's grace through the season, his goodness through it, even
Mm,
through a lot of really, really difficult things. But also, same with you, I look at my life and I'm like, I can't believe that this is my life. I don't deserve it, you know? And I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop for it to be
yeah.
like, just kidding, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah. Or you wake up and it was a dream. Say, no, man, that's
yeah. So, but I mean, and then that is just to me like just life with God, right? This roller coaster of relying on him daily, but it's just it will blow your mind. I mean,
hmm
and you have a whole book about it, about all the stories and the ways that God, and I love that you were willing to be obedient to that and to write the book the way he wanted you to write it.
Yeah, thank you.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, Chuck, any final thoughts for the listeners?
Words of wisdom. What are the words of wisdom I would have? I don't know. We can all, don't try to get, always try to be ready because we're never going to be ready. Those
Mm,
things that you're thinking about doing, dig up those old dreams. Everybody can, it also, I know it's cliche. I hate using cliches, but, a mile hike starts with the first step. And once you start taking some small steps, you get momentum. And then
mhm,
sometimes we have setbacks. I always think of when you have a setback is like if you want to, yeah, if you're in Alaska, you've probably done this in the last month. A car getting stuck or something, you don't just push the car like that. You go back and then you push into the car to get some momentum. So sometimes, life feels like, I've gone 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back. Well,
yeah.
sometimes those 2 steps back is the momentum that we need to push forward. So that
Huh.
would be my little nugget that
Yeah.
that I would leave listeners with right now.
That's really good. I've never heard it said that way before. I like that a lot.
I just thought of it, or the Holy Spirit just put it in my mind, something like that.
So you can follow Chuck. He has a website, chuckmobley.com, and then his book is available on Amazon. It's also a #1 bestseller in the men's Christian living category. So it's Leap Before You Look, But God by Chuck Mobley. And I'll link that in the show notes. But Chuck, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate the time. I'm new to this podcasting stuff. I don't even know that I knew what a podcast was like 2 months ago. I mean, I knew it was something that you tuned in and you listened to something you were interested in, but I certainly had never been on one. But I've been on a few now, and I'm enjoying it. I really appreciate your kindness and you allowing me to be on your show and spend time with you and your listeners.
Yeah. Well, you brought so much value and insight. It was a great conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right, thank you, Amy. I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Well, that is all for this episode, and I will see you guys next time.